Hello, and welcome back to the Dumb Defenses podcast, where we go around the world and through time to bring you the weirdest legal theories. I'm Frankie,
I'm Judah.
and this
Frankie,
week
what fresh hell are we bringing people this week, Frank?
you were going to talk about pinball, and I'm going to talk about prohibition.
Okay. Do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
You can go first.
You want me to go?
I think I went first last week.
Time is fake,
Time is so fake, especially after the pandemic.
especially after the pandemic. Well, I want to open with, if you've heard about the devastating wildfires
Oh
in
my goodness.
northwestern Washington,
Yep.
there are several
hmm
major wildfires. My own mother is evacuated, and her house was briefly on fire.
But it survived, right?
It's standing, and it appears mostly intact.
Nice.
Yeah, my stepdad's been able to go back inside of it. And there's been a devastating wildfire that has impacted the Warm Springs
hmm
reservation.
There's a huge one out there.
And one that we're not talking about that's very close to the Spokane fires is impacting the Colville Reservation.
hmm
And to encourage folks to go to Colville Tribe Site, Warm Springs Tribe Site, City of Spokane set up a donation hub center and to
Yep.
give people money.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're into the part of the year where the entire West Coast is coated in a layer of soot and ash.
Yeah.
It's been wildly smoky here in the Willamette Valley. There's a couple smaller fires about 20 miles west of us outside of Dallas, and it's just really smoky. My car was covered in ash the other day. Like, it's real,
Yeah.
even if you're not immediately in an evacuation area.
I'm from Eastern Washington. I lived in Spokane for a number of years. I graduated from North Central High School in Spokane, Washington. There are about 65,000 people
hmm
from Spokane who are evacuated from their homes. Many of them have lost their homes entirely. So please open your hearts, open your
Yes.
wallets for wildfire relief. And
Absolutely.
not just for City of Spokane. We cannot ignore devastation on this Colville Reservation and the Warm Springs Reservation. So open your wallets to
Mhm.
them.
The Warm Springs Reservation. I was checking on the local fire map yesterday, and there's a huge fire out there. The air quality is above 600. It is horrible conditions out there. They need the help.
Yeah. And I feel like Spokane is getting a lot of attention, and I just don't see the same attention being brought forward for the Colville Reservation and the Warm
Mhm.
Springs Reservation.
Mhm.
And that's because of racism.
Yep. Yep.
So I've been to the Colville Reservation. It's lovely, lovely, amazing people. Give your money.
Yep. Yeah. I haven't personally been to Warm Springs. I was invited, but unfortunately couldn't make it work in my schedule. But the rest of my commission who did go said it was beautiful and lovely and just wonderful people, very welcoming. And they now need our help, and we need to
Yeah.
make sure they have that.
So let's talk about pinball. I think our generation, Frank, spent a lot of time playing computer pinball because it was one of the few preloaded
It was the free
games.
game on that laptop. I did,
Yeah.
when in high school, spend far too much time perfecting that game.
Well, for many years, and up until in one state this year, pinball was wildly outlawed. And I want you to guess why pinball was outlawed.
Gambling?
As a gambling game. Correct. So up until 2026 in South Carolina, it was a status offense for minors to play pinball. Up until this year, kids couldn't play pinball. So let's go into the history of pinball. Pinball, as we know it today, is not the game that was really outlawed and faced this scrutiny for gambling. It used to be that pinball was more akin to the game like Plinko. Do you know what Plinko is? You drop the coin in the top and it goes down. There was no flappers on these early pinball games. You couldn't like push the ball back up. You're just shooting the ball up, and then it was coming down and you get a prize, maybe not get a prize. The sources that I used, the thing that got me really interested was Drunk History once again.
Of course.
Great
I love
show.
Drunk History.
Segment, season 3, episode 6, titled Games. There is a great article on this website, Retro Mash, called The Dark Days of Pinball.
Dun dun dun.
And a really comprehensive article on history.com by Christopher Klein. That time, America outlawed pinball. So the wave of outlawing begins in 1948. It'd been like here and there.
That's later than I would have expected.
It had been here and there outlawed. Prior to that, there had been a push during World War II, but a New York City police officer goes into a cigar shop, puts a penny into an early pinball game called
What is
Marvel
it with
Pop-Up.
these cops and having to like do the thing that's illegal before having, remember like last week with the obscenity thing, and it was just like, no, I gotta watch this movie first. Nope, I gotta play this game first. Like, what is this?
So he pulls back the little pinball plunger that shoots this metal ball up, wins a free game, but before he won a free game, he'd lost 5 pennies. Finally, on his 6th try after winning a free game and finally getting something, he goes and arrests the cigar store's owner for possession of a gambling machine.
Oh my God. Again, like just you know it's there. Just do the thing. Do you have to play the thing first? Do you have to watch the movie first? You know it's there. It's like the cops who arrest somebody for reckless driving, and then as they're driving them to the jail, they're like actively using both hands on the CAD.
Driving with their knees. So
body cam is a wonderful thing.
Like I mentioned before, these early pinball games, which we start seeing in the U.S., kind of Great Depression-y era, didn't have flippers. So everything was either dependent on people physically picking up the pinball machine and tilting it, or trying to strategically
like put a little English on it or something.
Pull back the plunger. People were betting on pinball outcomes, and you could win prizes from pinball. During the Great Depression, we also had something that's going to tie into what you're saying is prohibition. So gambling and dens where you could drink it up, speakeasies, were rampant, especially in the city of New York. And Mayor LaGuardia, after whom LaGuardia Airport is named, really hated pinball and saw it as this like mob center crime den for gambling.
Sounds like the same reasoning that Brandeis doesn't have a football team. The dude who donated all the money for the gym complex didn't like football because his kid had gotten severely injured in a football accident, and so he's like, you get this money if you don't have a football team. Okay.
All right. There's a great shirt that I saw for sale from Gonzaga University, Spokane. Said Gonzaga football undefeated since like 1942 because they haven't had a football team.
They haven't had a football team since then.
They have a great basketball team. So Prohibition ends, but the war is breaking out. And in 1942, the city of New York outlaws pinball. The city council approved Mayor LaGuardia's request to ban pinball. There's a pretty famous historical image of these pinball machines being smashed in public. In New York, the police were going into bowling alleys and malt shops and candy stores and pulling out pinball machines and smashing them. After this, pinball doesn't go away in the city, but it goes to places like adult stores.
Wink, wink.
Haha. And people are still playing pinball. And then you see tons of major cities after New York bans pinball, also banning pinball. And there was a focus on especially banning it for kids, so for minors not to be corrupted by the evil game of pinball.
Ooh.
And in the 50s, it was associated with leather jackets, cigarettes, and greaser hairstyles. Pinball. And it had a seedy reputation. Now we laugh because pinball seems like this tremendously innocuous.
I now have Music Man stuck in my head.
Yeah, it was totally that. And so early 40s, all the way through the 50s, all the way through the 60s, pinball is a rebel, outlaw ball game. And then the 70s come around. There's an underground contingent this whole time of pinball enthusiasts.
It's a
It,
fun
it's
game.
a fun game. I've played it at the arcade. I would play it again at the arcade and had a good time, even though you think the flippers should be closer together. Uh,
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever played any of the older machines that first got flippers, but there's a pinball museum up in Portland, I think. And I played some of those older 50s and 60s machines. And the ball is really heavy, the flippers are really clunky, and when you're used to playing the modern games, they're hard to play.
Very manual. There was a pretty famous person that was convicted of pinball gambling. It was the district attorney for the parish of Orleans in Louisiana was convicted of accepting bribes to protect pinball gambling.
Speaking of agents of the state getting arrested, did you see the video that the sheriff of Umatilla County got arrested for a Dewey?
Yeah, and he tried to use his position allegedly to get out of it, and he's under review. It's not really till 1974 that the California Supreme Court says pinball is more of a game of skill than it is a game of chance. So these are not gambling machines, these are skills machines.
I would agree with the newer machines being more skill than chance, but
And back in New York for the next 2 years, where really we see the birth of popularizing pinball bans, pinball remains illegal. Now comes our hero, the underground pinball enthusiast, writer Roger Sharp. The Amusement and Music Operators Association had heard that he was a top player. I don't know how they're like, I couldn't find any evidence of like rankings. Now there's pinball tournaments and whatnot.
oh yeah.
It's still very underground. So this writer and a pinball enthusiast is known as a top player. And the Amusement and Music Operators Association wants pinball to be legalized. So that association goes to a city council meeting, was just being held in a courtroom. They set up a pinball machine in the courtroom, and Roger Sharp comes in to play pinball. And he is able to show that he can predict where his shots are going to go, and therefore that it's a game of skill. So he proves to the city council in this historically, I would say it should be more famous, because I think this is really cute that they set up a pinball machine. They got a pinball player to come in there, and he was able to predict this shot. He could tell the city council where the balls are going to go. Also at the time, New York is, 70s prime grungy New York time. The city's facing a big bankruptcy crisis. And so when the city overturns the ban, they say, all right, you can have a pinball machine, but we're going to make you license it for $50. So they were
They needed money.
incentivized. They were incentivized. Now, this kind of story from New York makes waves, it makes news. It's kind of a cute, fun, like dramatic story that this guy went in and was able to prove by predicting where his shot was going to land that the city overturned. So then we see the pinball machine bans being lifted across the country, and now today we have official tournaments, people that collect vintage pinball machines, whole vintage arcades. But like I said, there's been a surprising recency of how some of these bans were lifted. Nashville didn't amend their ordinances to legalize pinball until 2004. Oakland, 2014.
So were these things that they forgot were on the books and then went, oh, whoops, we should fix this?
Yeah, that's what it really seemed like. I got that from a Kineticist article. And then there's an NPR article about the city of Kokomo, Indiana. And I don't know how many illicit pinball machines were in the city of Kokomo, Indiana, but the city council ended a ban on pinball machines in 2016. that had started in 1955.
Oh my.
And the state of South Carolina removed pinball from its status offense list for minors. So here we have like minor in possession of alcohol because it's legal for adults to possess alcohol. That's
Right.
a status offense. In some areas, truancy, skipping school is a status offense. So it's if you're in a certain age range that it is an offense. In 2026, they just did it.
Playing pinball.
Yep. Well, a minor playing pinball. And it's not even like they did it in January. As far as I can tell, they didn't remove it from the status offense until June. So
Like
less
a
than
month and a
2
half
months
ago.
ago. Less than 2 months ago,
Jeez.
South Carolina said, you know what? Kids can play pinball. And I'm going to say, Frankie, if I take your very own precious baby child to a retro...
Went to the pinball museum with us.
Well, if I took him to the vintage arcade and he said, I want to play pinball, I'm not going to think I'm going to corrupt my precious baby nephew by allowing him to play pinball. I think he's going to get frustrated really fast because he can't win. But
oh, he was very overstimulated by the end of a warehouse full of hundreds of pinball machines all going beep, 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 beep.
he can read now. He can play pinball.
Mm-hmm. I think he did. He was largely hanging out with Grandma while Kevin and I were having our own fun.
I'm just betting that if I took him to like the retro arcade, there's going to be other
he'd have
games.
a blast.
Yeah. But there's going to be other games that are going to be more interesting. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't think I'm corrupting him
No,
by
not at
allowing
all.
him to play pinball. Like, I'm sorry, I'm giving you a worse child than I borrowed by allowing your child to play pinball.
I'm 90% sure that he has played pinball before.
He's going to be 7 soon, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's plenty old.
He's fine.
He's fine.
But also too young to get a ticket.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know if we took him to South Carolina 3 months ago and we're like, we're going to let this first grader.
I mean, we were in South Carolina in June.
You should have taken him out for a game of illegal pinball. Like, you know what? Let's break the law, bud.
It wouldn't have known.
Yeah, I bet not a lot of people knew. I bet nobody's going to be rushing up to you like at the family arcade center, be like, don't let your kid play pinball at this Chuck E. Cheese. It's illegal.
Probably people don't even know who live there. It seems like one of those things that they forgot to take off the books and then we're cleaning up stuff in the legislative session or something.
Yes. And a spoiler alert for next week, we're going to talk about weird laws from across the country and how the actor, director Clint Eastwood bravely stood up for ice cream.
Yeah, there's all sorts of weird laws that are still on the books or recently removed from the books that, like, why? So that is a thing that we will be looking into along with some other stuff.
So legalize pinball. It's pretty fun. It's not super fun, but it's pretty fun.
It is. I very much enjoy pinball and have been known to just completely zone in and then not realize 3 hours have passed. Because ADHD.
Dopamine.
So much dopamine.
All right. That was my lighthearted journey into pinball being made illegal and then hashtag legalize pinball.
Sure. All right. So I'm going to look into prohibition.
Not of pinball.
Not of pinball, of drinking. Or not, technically not drinking, but owning and selling alcohol.
Wait, so drinking was never outlawed?
Yeah, we'll get to that. So my sources, PBS had a bunch of really good articles on the roots of prohibition and the unintended consequences of prohibition. And then I also looked into the National Archives had a lot of really good material, original source material and things like that, including the Volstead Act and obviously the Constitution and a couple other things that we will talk about as we go through.
I remember seeing an old advertisement from the Prohibition era, and it was for a grape juice concentrate. And in the instructions, it said, be careful not to add sugar mixed with water, put in an airtight container where air could escape and leave in the back of your cupboard for a month because it will make wine. Be
Oops.
careful not to do that because wine is illegal.
Yep. Yep.
So here's this advert. Be careful with this grape juice concentrate. You don't take this very specific set of actions to
Yep.
make wine.
Yep. So the Prohibition movement started in 1826 when the American Temperance Society was founded to try and start deterring people from drinking. And by the 18...
But the temperance movement was originally to temper drinking,
Yes.
and they were an anti-domestic violence movement.
Yes, they were. Yeah. So the big issue that brought Prohibition around was people getting drunk and then beating on their wives. Essentially, by the 1830s, Americans were drinking 3 times the amount of alcohol that we do today, and it was mostly consumed by men. And during the same time period, as we all know, women had very few rights. This combination made life hell for many women, and also just wreaking havoc on American lives in general. So this temperance movement, it started in Protestant churches, and they felt that removing alcohol from people's lives was the next step towards cleansing American sin after slavery was abolished. So they started out arguing moderation, but it soon turned into demanding that the government prohibit the sale of alcohol altogether. At this same time, we're also dealing with waves of immigration from Western Europe, specifically German immigrants. Germany is known for its beer making, and the German immigrants brought that culture with them and started ramping up their own beer production, trying to keep their traditions from home, while also, kind of trying to assimilate into the melting pot, right? Women were starting to feel with all of the heavy drinking anyways, and now there's more beer available, and men were drinking to excess. Women started to feel that their lives were being ruined by these millions of gallons of beer that their spouses were consuming. And eventually, in the 1870s, the Women's Christian Temperance Union was founded with the goal of not only deterring people from alcohol and drugs, but otherwise improve public morals. They joined the heavy hitters of the women's suffrage movement, such as Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, under their leader, Frances Willard. So by the end of the 19th century, the WCTU was lobbying local governments to prohibit the sale of alcohol, as well as doing educational campaigns of the ills of alcohol consumption. They were doing this because they saw alcohol as the root of all things wrong in society, and they found support from progressives who were trying to rectify the living conditions of immigrants, protect the rights of working children, improving public education, and advocating for women's rights. So you have this weird marriage of this far-right temperance movement with the super progressive people who kind of come together on everybody has a right to live free and sober.
I do want to just throw out there that we're saying, these white Protestant churches are saying, this is to cleanse our sins after slavery ended, not taking action.
Nope.
To end racism and racial violence.
No,
and
they're cleansing their souls.
And the suffrage movement not taking steps to include Black and brown women.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so shout out to Sojourner Truth.
Yep. Yeah, no, she was absolutely not on that list. So, Yeah, no, there was some definite white saviorism going on, sign of the times. Ultimately, the WCTU's goal was a constitutional amendment, but they weren't able to breach that seemingly impossible goal until they were joined by the Anti-Saloon League, led by Wayne Wheeler. The ASL ultimately became the most successful single-issue lobbying group in American history. They managed to rally the support of a multitude of seemingly opposed groups: Democrats, Republicans, progressives, populists, suffragettes, the KKK, the NAACP, the International Workers of the World, as well as industrial hard hitters such as Henry Ford, John D. Rockefeller, and Andrew Carnegie. Again, all of these generally diametrically opposed groups, the KKK and the NAACP, are all coming together around this issue of people drinking too much. We gotta stop the sale of alcohol. which is something that we have not seen in forever and probably will not see the way politics are today. There's so much polarization today that the idea of a bipartisan movement is pretty much off the table as far as I can tell.
I mean, there is an ongoing raging debate in American politics about whether or not kids should have free school lunches.
I don't see how that's a bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's why, right? Because you've got people on the right yelling and screaming about our tax dollars and people on the left being like, basic human rights?
Maybe kids should have food and all kids should have food. And if we take that a step further, maybe everybody should have food. And people are like, no, starve. Sidebar, there was and kind of still is a federal program for free school lunches for all.
Yes.
And most schools signed up for this
Mm-hmm.
because it provides federal funding for free school lunches for everybody.
Yes.
And a bunch of school districts elected not to sign up.
Which is wild to me.
No, some kids should not have food.
I don't have a response to that. So between 1905 and 1917, various states were trying to begin imposing their own prohibition laws, but they were struggling with that a little bit until 1913. Prior to 1913, there was no income tax, and so the government was reliant on liquor taxes in order to run. But in 1913, the 16th Amendment passed, allowing the federal government to levy income taxes, which would completely change the income structure for the federal government, allowing these liquor taxes to not be as important in order for the government to actually run. Combine that with anti-German fervor rising due to American entry into World War I. The Anti-Saloon League married the idea of beer and German brewers with treason because of Germany being the other side of the war in their propaganda, which really paved the way to allow the 18th Amendment to sail through Congress. So in 1917, the House wanted to make prohibition an amendment to the Constitution. And when Congress sent the proposed amendment to the states for ratification, they set a 7-year limit. Now keep in mind, in order to ratify a constitutional amendment, you need 3/4 of the states to ratify it. In 1917, that was 36 states had to ratify it. It took them 13 months.
Ooh, that's short.
It's super short. They were given 7 years. It took them 13 months. So,
Wow.
yeah, it was very, very fast. And there are some amendments to the Constitution. There was one that was hanging around since like the founding that didn't get ratified until 1994. So they can just chill for a very long time.
Well, the 19th Amendment
Mm-hmm.
wasn't ratified till 1920.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the 18th Amendment, the language of the 18th Amendment that is operable, that isn't just like, we will give you 7 years to do this, is after 1 year from the ratification of this article, the manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors within the importation thereof into or the exportation thereof from the United States and all territories subject to the jurisdiction thereof for beverage purposes is hereby prohibited. The amendment itself does not have an enforcement mechanism. It's just, this is outlawed. So that's when Congress put together the Volstead Act, which was passed on October 28th of 1919, which prohibited the production, sale, manufacture, etc. of any liquor over 0.5% alcohol by volume. And it also labeled anywhere liquor was illegally made, kept, or sold to be a legal nuisance, and established criminal and civil penalties for violating the prohibition rules. And it also created the ability of federal prohibition agents to enforce the laws. So it's essentially like they created their own little mini FBI strictly for the purpose of enforcing the prohibition laws.
Was there any consideration to the fact that it is harder to make a sourdough starter than it is to make wine in your own house?
I did not see anything about that. Also, not really something that came to mind, but yeah, I've tried sourdough a number of times, and my ADHD gets the best of me, because if it's not in front of my face, it doesn't exist. So,
And it used to be, so, Johnny Appleseed, the real person, who was going down just randomly planting apple seeds and selling whoever, because there was a requirement that homesteads have a certain number of fruit trees.
mhm,
And that was for the purpose of making apple cider,
mhm,
hard apple cider.
yep,
That's where all those apples went.
yep. So the Volstead Act did allow for the manufacture of alcohol for religious or medicinal purposes. Keep in mind that this was a time where medicine wasn't quite where it is now. So you're going to have like cough syrups that have alcohol in them. And there were certain wineries that were able to stay open throughout Prohibition by making religious wine. So it allowed for private consumption of alcohol as long as it was legally purchased. It did not outlaw drinking itself. So if you had purchased some wine or beer or whatever prior to Prohibition and it was just sitting around in your house, you could drink it in your house. That wasn't illegal. It was the purchase, manufacture, sale.
I bet a lot of people said that they had massive, massive stores of alcohol.
Yep. So this
This I've had it for 10 years.
Yeah. Or they heard it was happening and they bought it all up ahead of time. The amendment went into effect at 12:01 a.m. on January 17th of 1920. How long do you think it took for it to be violated?
I mean, 12:01, that is the time. It was violated immediately. I read a story about a prohibition agent that would time how long it would take for him to be able to locate alcohol in whatever city he visited.
Mhm.
And he left, I don't know, bus, train station, I don't know where, gets into a taxi cab and says, okay, I want you to take me to a drinking establishment. And the taxi driver turned around and handed him a glass of gin.
I love it. Within minutes of the amendment going into effect, 3 separate groups of armed bandits stole hard alcohol from freight cars, a government-bonded warehouse, and a truck. So, easier said than done to outlaw alcohol. There were some early successes. Arrests for drunk in public and consumption of alcohol fell by 30%.
Because they're drunk in private.
Yeah.
They're drinking inside instead of outside.
Consumption for liquor fell by 50%. There was, however, growing disobedience of the masses and growing inventiveness of distributors who wanted to keep drinking. As we know, alcohol was available if you knew where to find it, and the government didn't have the wherewithal to police the growing underground movement. By 1925, there were tens of thousands of speakeasies. The estimates were from anywhere from 30,000 to 100,000, depending on your resource. And ultimately, life under Prohibition became more violent than life without it due to rebellion and organized crime.
I'm going to jump in and say there is an entire musical movement in American culture surrounding how popular speakeasies are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is small band jazz.
Yep.
And this is why you see some things like resonator banjos or resonator ukuleles being popularized and distributed wildly. Also led to the incremental growth of the popularity of the guitar for these small setting dance halls and speakeasies.
Yep.
I own an instrument likely played in a speakeasy in Spokane, Washington from that time period.
Nice. And it should not have been surprising that it didn't go well. This wasn't the first time that various attempts to outlaw alcohol backfired. Dating back to the mid-1800s, in Massachusetts, they tried to outlaw drinking or alcohol sale in 1844. And what happened in that situation was a local tavern started charging people to see a striped pig. Drinks were on the house as part of admission. Maine tried to outlaw alcohol in 1851 and earned anger from the working class and Irish immigrants, and ultimately a deadly riot in 1855, leading to the law's repeal.
I forget what event I was at, but
super unsurprising that this didn't work on a national scale, right? Like, people are creative.
People are very creative.
People are going to crime if they want to crime.
Where single-serving water bottles, you couldn't sell them at this event.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a stand that was selling one peanut for $10, and it came with a free water bottle.
Yep.
So, like, the same thing.
Same vibes. So there's actually some semi-local history that I found on the National Archives. Sailor Jack. On February 21st of 1928, Melvin L. Hanks, who was a special agent at the U.S. Prohibition Office in Portland, Oregon, sent a letter to Ralph Reed, who was the special agent in charge of the U.S. Prohibition Office in San Francisco. Agent Hanks included a picture of an individual named Sailor Jack, a.k.a. Roy or Ray Sparks, a.k.a. P. Rex. The letter detailed how Sailor Jack had been apprehended the previous September near Medford, Oregon, by a prohibition agent named Terry A. Talent. And yes, that is actually his name, Terry A. Talent.
Terry A. Talent.
He's a talent at what? Catching. I don't know. Sailor Jack then became an informant for the government. However, he continued to attempt to sneak his liquor shipments past the prohibition agents, and ultimately he jumped bail and disappeared.
Because you just totally could.
Yeah, he just...
in the 20s. Like, I've changed my name again, and now I live one city over, and you will never find me.
Yep. So Special Agent Hanks, in this letter, further detailed that they have information from a very reliable source that he is running liquor from San Francisco to Crescent City. And this was the first time that the P. Rex alias had apparently come up. He was meeting in Crescent City at a yet-to-be-named hotel with a man called Byers. Again...
He's a buyer named Byers.
A buyer named Byers, yeah. Yep. And it is spelled B-Y-E-R-S, like you'd spell the last name. But I'm also wondering if somebody misheard it and just he was talking about the Byers. Who knows? Anyway, Special Agent Hanks finally stated, quote, "If anyone were to get Sailor Jack in a tight place, he would tell all he knows about the transportation of alcohol from San Francisco to various Pacific Coast points." Because apparently, like, if you put the screws to somebody, they'll talk.
Put the screws on him.
Well, I mean, it's also like that time of, yeah. Special Agent Hanks then requests that Special Agent in Charge Reed try to find Sailor Jack and interview him regarding such traffic. So, a little bit of local history. You got the Sailor Jack, Sailor Jerry labels of alcohol.
Sailor Jerry is named after a famous tattoo artist who popularized what we think of as like flash tattoos or like the American style of tattooing. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to disrespect his name.
That's fair. But I thought I had heard of a brand named Sailor Jack. Maybe I'm just getting it confused.
Well, there's also like there's Gentleman Jack.
Yeah. So,
but Jack Daniels is manufactured in a dry county in Tennessee.
Yes. Yep.
But at the time, if people haven't seen this, the architecture, people are building hidey holes and smugglers' tunnels into regular houses, like, where we keep their alcohol, and you could push a button and like part of the mantle will flip over and there'll be all your booze.
Yep.
And just, these are not master criminals. This is just somebody's house.
Yeah, no, it's just somebody's house. And the tone of this letter, it's like Special Agent Hanks is trying to seem like he knows all of this information when he's really just reaching out and being like, please help me find this dude.
And Also, I'm wondering, was there no vinegar production at the time? Because you cannot make vinegar without making alcohol first.
Right. And like I said, there were some wineries that were allowed to stay open because they allegedly were only making sacramental wine.
Huge increase in the amount of sacramental wine needed
Right.
across. I mean, instead of doing like the little teeny cups or just you dip your bread, it's a full pour up the street.
Yep. Yeah. And so that's probably where, you know, companies that were making vinegar got their wine from. There were ways to get it as long as on paper this distillery was only making sacramental wine.
Well, there was this big thing. So industrial alcohol was still permitted, and federal agents were poisoning it and caused the deaths of many, many Americans who drank this industrial alcohol because they had poisoned it.
Yeah. There was a lot of poorly planned out bits and bobs of this particular movement, to the point that as it was clearly coming to its end, President Herbert Hoover called it the Noble Experiment, which essentially became Prohibition's nickname. Which then leads to the 21st Amendment, which Section 1 reads, "The 18th Article of Amendment to the Constitution of the United States is hereby repealed."
Because so many people were making alcohol, running alcohol. This is the birth of the mob and major organized crime in the United States.
Yep. There is a Section 2 to the 21st Amendment that says transportation or importation to any state, territory, or possession of the United States for delivery or use therein of intoxicating liquors in violation of the laws thereof is still prohibited.
You can't take alcohol where it's prohibited by local law.
Right. So individual states were still able to have their local prohibitions on liquor. It was specifically hard liquor. It was not wine, beer, stuff like that. So local laws could still enforce bans on the hard alcohol, but it was no longer federally illegal. And just be careful what state you go into, just like with marijuana today.
Because we still have ridiculous seeming prohibitions. For example, in Oregon, there are several species of psychedelic mushroom that are indigenous to the area.
Yep.
And there was a big article in Portland that there's a giant patch of all these psychedelic mushrooms that popped up in a public park, and the reporter just down there where people are just picking them and shoving them into bags. There's a specific species that's closer to where you and I live, in the Willamette Valley, that thrives, and you see it most often in bark mulched edges of people's yards.
Yep.
And while I have not picked any, I have been 90% certain that I've been like, I think it's right there. I think this federal crime, this state crime is growing next to this person's roses.
Yep. Yeah. And if it's growing wild, are you supposed to kill it? There's not really clear guidance on that.
Yeah. What is a possession? What if it's growing? I put bark in my yard. I don't know. What if I don't know? A lot of it's under hedges.
Yeah.
Am I in possession of that mushroom if I didn't put it there and it's growing in the bark mulched edges under my bush? But also, please don't know what they're looking for.
Right. So on the day that the amendment was repealed, FDR wrote a proclamation on the repealing of the 18th Amendment. Congress had been working on this post-war recovery statute, which FDR, when he signed it into law, the start date on that effort was either when the country gets back into the black or when the 18th Amendment is repealed, whichever comes first.
Oh.
So guess which one came first? So the amendment was ultimately repealed on December 5th of 1933. FDR implored Americans to, quote, restore greater respect for law and order, end quote.
Stop breaking the law by making booze at your house.
By only buying alcohol or liquor from licensed dealers. He also, quote, personally to every individual family in our nation, end quote, requested adherence to purchasing from licensed dealers to aid in the breakup of the underground illegal liquor market, as well as allowing the government to collect taxes on those sales. So again, we're going back to taxing the liquor in order to have some revenue, but also to break up the unlicensed underground stuff that had been happening during Prohibition. And the end of this letter was so just... I'll just read it to you. I ask the wholehearted cooperation of all of our citizens to the end that this return to individual freedom shall not be accompanied by the repugnant conditions that obtained prior to the adoption of the 18th Amendment and those that have existed since its adoption. Failure to do this honestly and courageously will be a living reproach to us all. He further specifically asked that states not allow the saloon to come back, as well as the bootlegger, and, quote, such others who would profit at the expense of good government, law, and order, end quote. He hopes that people will not fall back to the level of drinking from prior to Prohibition and encourages education towards temperance.
This kind of reminds me of like California legalizing marijuana for recreational use and it being so difficult and cost prohibitive for people, especially certain areas or small growers to become licensed and fully compliant with the state, that they still have an active, very active criminal underground marijuana industry.
Oregon made it a little bit easier because we had the medical marijuana for, I know California did as well, but it's so easy to become a medical grower in Oregon that that's kind of where all the small time growers went, and they would essentially grow for themselves and their friends. Whereas then the licensing came through. It took time. The year that, and I don't remember exactly what year it was, but when the ballot measure 91 passed, which allowed the recreational marijuana, it gave the legislature 6 months to come up with licensing rules, and then another 6 months for them to start like vetting places for licensing, and then another 6 months to start actually issuing licenses. And so it wasn't until like 2 years later, after the ballot measure passed, that people were actually able to walk into a dispensary
and purchase. And now there's a dispensary everywhere.
It's like Starbucks.
Yeah, there's the great comedian Maria Bamford jokes that she wants to own a dispensary inside of a different dispensary. I mean, weed is not nearly as dangerous as alcohol.
It's not. I mean, it can be addictive. It's not as dangerously addictive as alcohol is. The expected side effects, i.e. the high that you get off of it, generally not as dangerous as when people have alcohol. And, you know, I mean, nobody should be using substances and driving, but it's
far less dangerous to the community.
Far less dangerous to the community to have marijuana be legal than alcohol, frankly.
I'm frustrated with our home state right now because we've legalized the use of psilocybin for a very narrow purpose. And
for those who aren't familiar, because of the research isn't very widespread yet, there has been some very promising early research that microdosing of psilocybin can be very useful in healing from PTSD in combination with EMDR or other modalities of therapies. And it can help you process through things faster than in a typical EMDR session, which can take 7 to 8 sessions, depending on the severity of the trauma, and it can actually help get you through it in 1 to 2 sessions. So it's very, very promising, very early research.
There's some promising early research on the use of larger doses of psilocybin in early addiction and recovery. There's some more established research on the use of psilocybin for easing anxiety in people with terminal illnesses.
Yep.
And I wanted to say that there was some very early notches of research in treatment-resistant depression.
Yes. So treatment-resistant depression, there are a number of different modalities that they've been working on. You may see and I hate pharmaceutical commercials because it causes people to ask for things that they don't have ailments for. But if you see the commercials for like Rexulti and some of the other ones, those are actually antipsychotics. That's why they have the warning of not giving it to people with dementia. And so
it will have a paradoxical effect.
Well, it increases the chance of early mortality in people with dementia. So when you're dealing with treatment-resistant depression, different modalities like adding an antipsychotic can help break somebody out of it. Some more invasive therapies like electroconvulsive therapy. I've seen night and day in a client before and after electroconvulsive therapy.
And it's not like they show in the movies. It's not painful.
No,
it's
you're
not...
sedated.
It's very gentle.
It's very gentle. It's very calculated. It is over multiple sessions. I think the average treatment is 4 to 6 sessions, but you can be done in as few as 2 depending on how well you respond to it. There's the transcranial magnetism. I'm getting the acronym wrong.
I read some stuff about that.
It sounds kind of woozy, but it apparently, again, early research is showing some promising for that, and the psychedelics as well.
The psychedelic research and why Oregon legalized it is because they wanted specific groups of people to have access to psychedelics specifically in a treatment setting.
Right.
Which I think is a very admirable goal.
Mm-hmm.
However, the licensing process that it takes for the people who must sit with you while you're experiencing, I guess you could call them symptoms of taking a psychedelic drug, you're tripping balls.
Yep.
Are incredibly expensive. It's very, very time consuming. It's also unclear, and insurance does not pay for it.
No.
So the sessions themselves are basically inaccessible.
They're cost prohibitive
to most people because of the cost prohibition and the supply and demand. So if I have a client who hypothetically is dealing with an opiate addiction and you think they have a treatment-resistant opiate addiction, there is promising research on the use of psychedelics in treating treatment-resistant substance use disorder, and those people just straight up do not have access to that therapy modality.
Because generally if people are that far into their addiction,
they're not going to have $3,000.
They've lost all ability to support themselves.
Yeah, and you have to pay cash on the barrelhead to go. I wish it was things like the use of ketamine in treatment-resistant depression.
Yep, that's another thing.
Has been very promising, and a lot of insurances do pay for it.
Yes.
And it's a lot easier to get your little babysitter. But for some reason, psychedelic mushrooms, which in the lethality scale are some of the...
Significantly lower.
Some of the safest, like least risk of addiction, least risk of death.
Yeah. And it may be one of those things, like, part of it is that it is super stigmatized because you think of psychedelic mushrooms and you think of, people on the street talking to a lamppost and stuff like that. It gets very much tied in with the scary, crazy, unhoused image that people push, which is completely wrong on multiple levels. But the fact that there is starting to be some research and that Oregon, as onerous as they've made the requirements, has legalized it for treatment purposes, that is a first step, right? Yeah. The first step to marijuana legalization was the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program, right? And then that expanded, and then there's enough signatures to get on the ballot, and now it's legal. So hopefully it is a small step, but hopefully it's the first step towards something more accessible down the road for treatment purposes, or even recreational purposes eventually, right? Like,
you really shouldn't drive if you're taking a psychedelic.
No, you really shouldn't.
You really shouldn't.
You should not drive if you've taken any substances, unless they are substances that are supposed to make your mind work better, like antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds, etc.
Yeah. Nothing that impairs with your ability to operate a giant murder machine.
Yep.
Yeah, please, nobody do that. I have hope because internet research and I see how the opioid epidemic is impacting these really lovely, lovely people that I work with. And I watched a documentary about the use of a different extremely potent psychedelic that's outlawed in the United States called ibogaine,
Mm-hmm.
and it's studied in other countries specifically for the fact that it can reduce withdrawal
Yep.
symptoms and produce a positive longer term effect on the brain that
Yep.
people are less likely to relapse. Is like you at least want to have good studies if there's something that could be helping people with opiate addiction.
Right. But because we're a puritanical country, the feds, the DEA, are more focused on enforcement than actually being like, hey, let's study some of the medical benefits of cannabis.
Yeah.
And you have to legalize it in order to do that because you can't have people committing a federal crime while they're in a study.
Well, so there's a lot of these drugs that are Schedule 1 drugs, which means that
Correct.
the federal government classifies them as having no scientific or medical benefit whatsoever.
Right.
So they can't even be explored. And so when we're
Mm-hmm.
hearing about, the rumors or the tales from other countries about these restricted substances being useful, we just can't even.
Right. And so, like, a Schedule 2 class would be something like a hydrocodone, which is absolutely a medicine and absolutely has medical
Mhm.
purpose. Also highly addictive.
Highly addictive. I've never seen the ibogaine plant. I've never met anybody that I know has taken it. But from this little documentary, I was like, it's an extremely intense, very, very potent psychedelic. So, like, you are not in your body anymore. And I can't imagine somebody's like, I did that yesterday, crapped my pants, threw up, had an out of body experience. I'm going to do it again next week.
Right. Right. Yeah, drugs are varied and wonderful and scary, but under a specialist's care, it
Hmm?
should be absolutely fine.
I am a smart, educated person, and I do not trust me to monitor my own antidepressants.
I mean,
I mean,
that's
like
why the
taking them
doctors
every.
prescribe them,
Yes,
right?
I go to a person who went through a very miserable 74 years of school to
Mm-hmm.
tell me what the right dose is for me. Because if I was like, well, let's just guess, I'll probably fry my brain.
Well, when I started on antidepressants, I was in crisis. And so I went to my primary care provider, and they did kind of just guess and started me at 2 IV a dose. And I felt very strange in my head. And then I finally got into a psychiatrist, and he lowered the dose, and I felt much better.
Yeah, gotta get the right one.
Oh, yeah, long story short, drugs can be fun, drugs can be useful, drugs are highly regulated. And maybe we need to take a look at how highly regulated they are in order to make sure that we can study them for medicine, because a lot more things are medicinal than you think.
Yes, I think my takeaway in the shorter version is write to your senator and congressperson
Mm-hmm.
and ask them to ask the federal government to re-examine the schedule classification of drugs because some of these drugs could be very useful for current crises that we're having.
Yep. Yes, absolutely. So
All
that
right.
brings us to the end. Next week, you will finally get my hearsay case because I insist on it. And otherwise, we'll be doing a grab bag of weird old laws.
Weird old laws, maybe even current laws, and a surprise segment that even Frankie didn't know about that I thought of and forgot to bring up in our pre-show conversation. We're going to be talking about a very recent major legal case in a new segment I'm calling What in the Fresh Hell Is This?
So, like, subscribe, leave a rating, leave a review. If you're aware of a weird state or local law that we might not be aware of that shouldn't be on the books but still is or was recently repealed, give us an email at dumbdefensespodcast@gmail.com or reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, or Blue Sky. And I think I hit everything. And we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.